The scorching afternoon sun beat down on Oakridge, Wyoming Territory, as Olivia Allen stood frozen in the center of the dusty Main Street, her cheeks burning with shame and tears threatening to spill from her eyes. The crowd that had gathered outside Thornton's general store jeered and whispered behind raised hands, their judgment cutting deeper than any physical wound ever could. The year was 1875, and in this unforgiving frontier town, a woman's reputation was as fragile as morning frost. Thief. Edgar Thornton bellowed, his portly frame blocking the store entrance as he pointed an accusatory finger at Olivia. I caught her red-handed, trying to steal medicine, no better than the common criminals we hang at the edge of town. Olivia's voice trembled as she tried to speak. Please, Mr. Thornton, I wasn't stealing, I was only— Silence, Thornton roared. I know what I saw. Your father left nothing but debts and a worthless daughter who thinks she can take what isn't hers. The crowd grew, feeding on the spectacle of her humiliation. Women who had once greeted her warmly now looked at her with disdain. Men spat in the dirt near her feet. 3 weeks since her father's passing, and Olivia had gone from respected schoolteacher to town pariah over a misunderstanding that no one would allow her to explain. She took a step backward, willing herself to run, to flee from the cruel stares and whispers, but her legs wouldn't move. The weight of the townspeople's judgment held her in place like quicksand. Then, through the crowd, a tall figure emerged. Zachary Gentry, owner of the Double G Ranch outside of town, moved with the easy confidence of a man who commanded respect without asking for it. His dark Stetson shaded piercing blue eyes that surveyed the scene with quiet intensity. Though not yet 30, Zachary had built his ranch from nothing after returning from the war, his reputation as fair but uncompromising making him both respected and feared throughout the territory. Olivia had seen him in town on occasion, but had exchanged no more than polite nods with the man. The cowboys who worked his ranch were known to be loyal to him, speaking of their boss with a reverence typically reserved for a father or older brother, despite his relative youth. Zachary stepped between Olivia and Thornton, his broad shoulders shielding her from the storekeeper's glare. That's enough, Edgar, he said, his voice carrying across the now hushed street. Making accusations in public without proof isn't how we do things in Oakridge. Thornton's face reddened further. This is none of your business, Gentry. The girl was caught stealing medicine clear as day. Is that so? Zachary's voice remained level, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Then you won't mind if we take this matter to Sheriff Mills instead of trying her in the court of public opinion. Before Thornton could respond, Zachary turned to face Olivia. Without hesitation, he extended his hand to her, a simple gesture that in that moment felt like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. Miss Allen, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, would you allow me to escort you away from this nonsense? Olivia stared at his outstretched hand, momentarily paralyzed by shock. No one had stood up for her since her father's death. No one had shown her a shred of kindness or understanding. With trembling fingers, she placed her hand in his, feeling the calluses of a man who worked his land as hard as any of his ranch hands. As Zachary's warm hand closed around hers, he did something that caused the crowd to fall into stunned silence. Instead of hurrying her away in shame, he placed her hand in the crook of his arm and walked with her, slowly and deliberately, down the main street of Oakridge. His head was held high, his stride measured and proud, as if he were escorting the finest lady in the territory to a grand ball rather than a disgraced schoolteacher accused of theft. Keep your chin up, he murmured for her ears alone. Don't give them the satisfaction. Olivia swallowed hard and straightened her spine, matching her steps to his. Together they walked past the gawking townspeople, past the blacksmith shop and the saloon, past the milliners where ladies quickly ducked inside to avoid being associated with her. Why are you doing this? She whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of their boots on the packed dirt. Because a man who stands by while a lady is wrongfully shamed isn't worth the ground he walks on, Zachary replied simply. And because I know what it's like to have the town turn against you without hearing your side. They continued walking until they reached the small white church at the edge of town. Only then did Zachary slow his pace, leading her to a wooden bench beneath an ancient cottonwood tree. "Now," he said, releasing her arm and turning to face her properly, "would you like to tell me what really happened in there?" Olivia looked down at her hands, now clasped tightly in her lap. "My father had a debt with Mr. Thornton before he died. I've been trying to pay it off with what little I earn from teaching, but it's not enough. Today, I went to buy medicine for little Sarah Cooper. She's one of my students and has come down with fever. Her family can't afford it." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "Mr. Thornton accused me of trying to steal it when I was only asking if I could pay in installments." Zachary's expression darkened. "Thornton's never been one to show mercy when there's profit to be had." "I wasn't stealing," Olivia said firmly, meeting his eyes for the first time. "I would never. My father raised me better than that." "I believe you," Zachary said simply. Those 3 words, spoken without hesitation, broke something inside her. The tears she had been fighting spilled over, tracking silently down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, quickly wiping them away, "for believing me and for what you did back there." Zachary nodded, a slight smile softening his weathered features. "Miss Allen, Olivia," she interrupted. "Please, after what you just did, I think you've earned the right to use my given name." "Olivia," he amended, the name sounding somehow different in his deep voice. "I'd like to help if you'll allow it." Pride flared in her chest. "I don't need charity, Mr. Gentry. It's Zachary. And it's not charity I'm offering, it's justice." He stood, extending his hand once more. "Come with me to Sheriff Mills, we'll settle this matter properly." Olivia hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his again. "Lead the way, Zachary." The sheriff's office was a small, unassuming building just off the main street. Sheriff Mills was a graying man with kind eyes that belied his reputation for toughness. He listened patiently as Zachary explained the situation, Olivia adding details when necessary. "Edgar's always been quick to judge," Mills said when they finished, "and even quicker to protect his profits." He turned to Olivia. "Your father was a good man, Miss Allen, helped me through a rough patch when my Mary was sick years back. I'm sorry I wasn't there today." "Thank you, Sheriff," Olivia said softly. Mills nodded. "I'll have a word with Edgar. Make sure he understands the difference between asking for credit and stealing." He gave Zachary a knowing look. "Good to see you stepping in, Gentry. Town needs more men willing to stand up for what's right." As they left the sheriff's office, Olivia felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The stares from passers-by still followed them, but they seemed less accusatory now, more curious. "The medicine for the Cooper girl," Zachary said suddenly. "Do you still need it?" Olivia nodded. "Sarah's been burning with fever for 2 days. Her mother's beside herself with worry." Without another word, Zachary led her to the doctor's office at the end of town. Dr. Peterson, a thin man with spectacles perpetually perched on his nose, greeted them with surprise. "Miss Allen, Mr. Gentry." "What brings you both here today?" "Sarah Cooper needs medicine," Zachary said. "Whatever she needs, put it on my account." Dr. Peterson raised an eyebrow but asked no questions as he prepared a package of powders and a small bottle of tonic. "Give her this twice daily. The fever should break within 2 days." Olivia accepted the package, her throat tight with emotion. "I'll pay you back," she said to Zachary once they were outside. He shook his head. "Consider it my contribution to your student's education." "Why are you helping me?" The question burst from her before she could stop it. "You hardly know me." Zachary was silent for a moment, his eyes scanning the town as if looking for something beyond its dusty streets and weathered buildings. "When I came back from the war," he finally said, "I was a different man than the boy who left. The town wasn't sure what to make of me. Some said I'd done things, terrible things. They weren't entirely wrong." He met her gaze. "Your father was the only one who offered me work when no one else would. Said he didn't care what a man had done in war, only what he chose to do in peace." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes again. That sounded exactly like her father, always looking for the good in people, always offering second chances. "I didn't know," she said softly. "No reason you should have. It was years ago, before you returned from that ladies' school back east." Zachary offered his arm once more. May I see you home? The walk to Olivia's small house on the outskirts of town was quiet but comfortable. The modest white clapboard structure with its neat front porch had once felt like a haven. Since her father's passing, it had become a lonely reminder of all she had lost. At the gate, Zachary stopped. "Will you be all right?" Olivia looked up at him, really seeing him for perhaps the first time. The sun was beginning to set, casting his features in golden light, softening the hard lines of his jaw and the tiny scar that cut through his left eyebrow. "I will be," she said. "Thanks to you," he nodded, touching the brim of his hat. "Good day, Olivia Allen." She watched him walk away, his tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun, and felt something stir within her, something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. The next morning, Olivia rose early to deliver the medicine to the Cooper family. Their gratitude was overwhelming, Mrs. Cooper embracing her with tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. By the time Olivia arrived at the schoolhouse, she felt lighter than she had in weeks. Her students seemed to notice the change, responding with more enthusiasm to her lessons than they had since her father's passing. Even little Sarah's empty desk couldn't dampen her spirits, knowing the girl would soon be on the mend. At midday, as the children were eating their lunches in the shade of the big oak tree outside, a rider approached. Olivia recognized Zachary immediately, his straight-backed posture unmistakable even from a distance. The children fell silent as he dismounted, several of the boys staring in awe at the legendary rancher. "Miss Allen," he greeted, removing his hat. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," Olivia replied, ignoring the curious glances from her students. "What brings you to our schoolhouse?" Zachary reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. "I found these books in my library, thought your students might enjoy them." Olivia unwrapped the package to find 3 volumes, an illustrated collection of Aesop's fables, a primer on natural history, and a well-worn copy of The Last of the Mohicans. "These are wonderful," she said, genuinely touched by the gesture. "Thank you." The children gathered around, excitement bubbling as they examined the books. Young Tommy Jenkins, whose father worked at the Double G, looked up at Zachary with undisguised admiration. "Did you really fight in the war, Mr. Gentry?" he asked. Zachary's expression grew serious. "I did, son." "And did you kill lots of rebels?" Another boy chimed in eagerly. "Thomas, Jacob," Olivia admonished. "Those are not appropriate questions," but Zachary held up a hand. "It's all right." He crouched down to the boy's level, his voice gentle but firm. "War isn't something to glorify, boys. There's no honor in taking a life, even when it's necessary. The true measure of a man is not how many fights he wins, but how many he avoids while still standing for what's right." The children fell silent, absorbing his words. Olivia watched him, seeing beyond the tough exterior to the thoughtful man beneath. In that moment, something shifted in her perception of Zachary Gentry. After the children returned to their lessons, Zachary lingered, watching from the doorway as Olivia read from one of the books he'd brought. "You're good with them," he observed as the last student filed out at the end of the day. Olivia smiled, tidying the small classroom. "They're good children, eager to learn, most of them." "Like you were, I'd imagine." She looked up, surprised. "How did you know?" "Your father spoke of you often," Zachary said. "Proud as could be when you went off to that school in Boston. Even prouder when you came back to teach here, though he never understood why you'd returned to this dusty corner of nowhere when you could have stayed in civilization." Olivia's hands stilled on the book she was arranging. "I loved Boston, the museums and libraries, the lectures and concerts, but this is home. These children deserve the same chances I had." Zachary nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Noble, but it can't be easy. Especially now with your father gone." The simple acknowledgement of her loss, spoken without pity but with genuine empathy, brought a lump to her throat. "No," she admitted. "It's not easy. The school board has been less than supportive. They've reduced my salary, claiming budget constraints. Between that and my father's debts." "Is that why you were asking Thornton for credit?" Olivia nodded, embarrassed. "The house needs repairs before winter. The roof leaks, and there's a draft in the bedroom that cuts right through to the bone on cold nights." Zachary was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable. "I could help with that." "No," Olivia said firmly. "You've done enough already, I'll manage." He studied her face, a hint of admiration in his eyes. "Stubborn, your father mentioned that too." A laugh escaped her, surprising them both. "He would have. It was his least favorite of my qualities." "And what was his favorite?" Zachary asked, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Olivia thought for a moment. "He always said I had a good heart, that I saw the best in people." Her smile faded, sometimes to my detriment. "A good heart is never a detriment," Zachary said softly. "Not in my experience." Their eyes met, and for a breathless moment, Olivia felt as if something important passed between them, something unnamed but powerful. The moment was broken by the church bell tolling the hour. "I should let you get home," Zachary said, settling his hat back on his head. "Good evening, Miss Allen." "Good evening, Mr. Gentry," she replied, watching as he mounted his horse and rode away, wondering why the schoolhouse suddenly felt emptier than before. The following week brought unexpected challenges. Word spread through town about Zachary's public defense of Olivia, and rumors began to circulate. Some said she had bewitched him, others that he was merely being charitable to a woman in desperate straits. The whispers followed her through town, making her trips to purchase supplies and exercise in enduring sidelong glances and abruptly ended conversations. On Wednesday, Olivia arrived at the schoolhouse to find a note pinned to the door. In precise handwriting, it informed her that the school board would be meeting that evening to discuss concerns about the moral character of educational staff. It was signed by Elias Wilcox, head of the school board and Edgar Thornton's brother-in-law. Olivia's hands trembled as she removed the note. She knew what this meant. They were looking for a reason to dismiss her, to replace her with someone more biddable, someone who wouldn't challenge Thornton's authority or befriend a man as independently minded as Zachary Gentry. The day passed in a fog of anxiety. She went through the motions of teaching, but her mind was elsewhere, calculating how long her meager savings would last if she lost her position, wondering if any other town in the territory would hire a female teacher with a questionable reputation. As the last student left, Olivia sank into her chair, allowing herself a moment of despair. The thought of leaving Oakridge, of abandoning the children she'd grown to love, was almost unbearable. But the thought of staying, facing daily humiliation and struggling to survive, was equally daunting. The sound of approaching hoofbeats roused her from her thoughts. Looking up, she was surprised to see not Zachary but his foreman, a weathered man named Marcus, whom she recognized from town. "Miss Allen," he greeted, removing his hat. "Mr. Gentry sends his apologies for not coming himself. He's been called away to handle a situation with some cattle rustlers near the north pasture." "I see," Olivia said, trying to hide her disappointment. "Is there something I can help you with?" Marcus handed her a folded note. "He asked me to deliver this, madam, said it was important." Olivia opened the note, reading Zachary's bold handwriting. "Miss Allen, I've heard about the school board meeting. Wilcox is using his position to do Thornton's bidding. I've spoken with Sheriff Mills, who will attend to ensure fair proceedings. Please accept the ride Marcus offers. I would not want you to face this alone. Yours, ZG." Olivia looked up at Marcus, who stood patiently by his horse. "Mr. Gentry thought you might need an escort to the meeting," he explained. "Said to tell you that sometimes showing strength means accepting help when it's offered." A smile tugged at Olivia's lips despite her anxiety. How like Zachary to anticipate her pride. "Please tell Mr. Gentry I appreciate his thoughtfulness," she said, gathering her shawl, "and I would be grateful for the escort." The town hall was already crowded when Olivia arrived. It seemed every resident of Oakridge had heard about the meeting and was eager to witness the proceedings. She felt their stares as Marcus led her to a seat near the front, then took up a position against the wall, his presence a silent show of support from the Double G Ranch. The school board sat at a long table at the front of the room, 5 men, all prominent business owners in town. Elias Wilcox, a thin man with perpetually pursed lips, sat at the center, flanked by Edgar Thornton and 3 others who had always treated Olivia with distant politeness at best. Sheriff Mills arrived just as Wilcox called the meeting to order, taking a seat near Olivia with a reassuring nod. "We are here tonight," Wilcox began, his reedy voice carrying across the now silent room, "to address concerns about the moral fitness of our schoolteacher, Miss Olivia Allen." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "It has come to our attention that Miss Allen has engaged in behavior unbecoming a teacher of young minds. Specifically, her association with certain individuals of questionable character and her alleged attempt to obtain goods without payment from a respected merchant." Olivia's cheeks burned as every eye in the room turned to her. She had expected this, but the public nature of the accusation still stung. "Furthermore," Wilcox continued, "there is the matter of Miss Allen's living situation. A young, unmarried woman living alone, entertaining male visitors, this sets a poor example for the impressionable children in her care." At this, Sheriff Mills stood. "Now wait just a minute, Elias. I've known Olivia Allen since she was knee-high to a grasshopper. Her character is beyond reproach, and suggesting otherwise without evidence is slander, plain and simple." Wilcox's face soured. "We have witnesses who saw her in the company of Zachary Gentry, walking arm in arm through town in broad daylight. Since when is accepting a gentleman's escort a moral failing?" The new voice came from the back of the room, and heads turned as Zachary Gentry himself strode down the center aisle, still dusty from the trail, his expression thunderous. Olivia's heart leapt at the sight of him, relief and something warmer flooding through her. "Mr. Gentry," Wilcox said, clearly discomfited by his arrival, "this is a school board matter. Your presence is not required." "When you use my name to impugn a lady's reputation, it becomes my matter," Zachary replied, his voice level but with an edge that made several board members shift uncomfortably. He reached the front of the room, turning to address the gathered townspeople rather than the board. "Many of you have known me for years. You know I'm not a man given to speeches or public displays, but I cannot stand by while good people are slandered for political gain." The room fell completely silent, every ear straining to catch his words. "Miss Allen is being targeted because she dared to stand up to Edgar Thornton's bullying, because she puts the welfare of her students above the profits of merchants, and yes, because she accepted my help when the rest of this town turned its back on her." He turned to face the board directly. "If association with me is a crime in Oakridge, then half the men in this room should be on trial. I've done business with most of you, helped some of you when times were hard. Did my character only become questionable when I defended someone Thornton wanted to intimidate?" Edgar Thornton's face had turned an alarming shade of purple. "Now see here, Gentry. No, you see here," Zachary cut him off. "You accused an innocent woman of theft in public without evidence. When that failed to run her out of town, you convinced your brother-in-law to attack her livelihood." He looked around the room again. "Is this the kind of town we want to be, where a woman can lose everything because she lacks a man's protection, where teaching children to read is less important than appeasing the powerful?" A murmur ran through the crowd, and Olivia saw several people nodding in agreement. Mrs. Cooper rose from her seat, her voice trembling but determined. "Miss Allen saved my Sarah's life last week, got her medicine when we couldn't afford it. She's been teaching our children for 2 years without complaint, even when the board cut her pay. If she's not fit to teach our children, I don't know who is." Others began to speak up, parents whose children had thrived under Olivia's care, townspeople who remembered her father's kindness, even the baker's wife who admitted that Edgar Thornton had tried to overcharge her just the previous month. As the tide of public opinion visibly turned, Wilcox attempted to regain control of the meeting. "This is highly irregular. I move that we put it to a vote," interrupted Harold Jensen, the oldest member of the school board and the only one who had remained silent until now. "Let the town decide if Miss Allen should continue as teacher." "Seconded," called several voices from the crowd. Wilcox looked as if he'd swallowed something sour, but with the sheriff present and public sentiment clearly against him, he had little choice. "Very well. All those in favor of retaining Miss Allen as schoolteacher, raise your hands." Hands shot up across the room. Nearly every parent, most of the townspeople, and even 3 members of the school board itself, including Jensen. Those opposed. Only Wilcox, Thornton, and a handful of their closest associates raised their hands. "The motion carries," Jensen announced, a satisfied smile creasing his weathered face. "Miss Allen remains our teacher." The room erupted in applause. Olivia sat stunned, overwhelmed by the sudden reversal of her fortunes. She felt a gentle touch on her arm and looked up to find Zachary beside her, concern in his eyes. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. Unable to speak past the lump in her throat, she simply nodded, blinking back tears of relief and gratitude. As the meeting broke up, townspeople approached to offer congratulations and support. Mrs. Cooper embraced her warmly, reporting that Sarah was already feeling better and would return to school the following week. Even Mr. Jensen came to shake her hand, apologizing for not speaking up sooner. Through it all, Zachary remained at her side, a steady presence in the swirl of emotions and conversations. When the last well-wisher had departed, he offered her his arm. "May I see you home?" The night air was cool as they walked, stars brilliantly clear in the vast Wyoming sky. For several minutes, they moved in companionable silence, Olivia still processing the events of the evening. "Thank you," she finally said. "Not just for tonight, but for everything. I don't know how I can ever repay you." Zachary glanced down at her, his expression softening in the moonlight. "There's nothing to repay. I did what any decent man would do." "No," Olivia said firmly. "Most decent men would have walked past. Most decent men would have minded their own business. You did more." They reached her gate, and Zachary stopped, turning to face her fully. "Perhaps I had my own reasons." "What reasons?" she asked, her heart suddenly beating faster. He seemed to consider his words carefully. "When I first came back from the war, I was lost, angry. Your father saw something in me worth saving. He gave me a chance when no one else would." He paused. "When I saw you standing alone in that street, facing the town's judgment, I saw myself, and I thought maybe I could do for you what your father did for me." Olivia studied his face, seeing the vulnerability beneath the strength. "Is that the only reason?" Something flickered in his eyes, uncertainty, perhaps, or hope. "No," he admitted softly, "not the only reason." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities. Olivia found herself wanting to reach out to touch his face, to thank him in ways that went beyond words. But propriety held her back, the lessons of a lifetime too deeply ingrained to ignore. "Will you come to dinner tomorrow?" she asked instead. "It's the least I can do to thank you properly." A smile spread across his face, transforming his features. "I'd be honored, Miss Allen." "Olivia," she reminded him, "after tonight, I think formality between us is rather unnecessary." "Olivia," he agreed, the name a caress on his lips. "Until tomorrow, then." He touched the brim of his hat and turned to go, then paused. "One more thing. I've taken the liberty of speaking to some of the men who owed your father favors. They'll be by tomorrow to look at that roof. No arguments," he added when she opened her mouth to protest. "Consider it payment for future reading lessons. My foreman's boy can barely write his name, and I aim to change that." Before she could respond, he was gone, striding down the moonlit road with that same confident gait that had first caught her attention. Olivia stood at her gate long after he'd disappeared from sight, her mind racing with thoughts of the future, a future that suddenly seemed much brighter than it had that morning. The next day passed in a flurry of activity. True to Zachary's word, several men arrived early to inspect her roof, bringing materials and tools. By midday, the worst of the leaks had been patched, and they promised to return the following week to complete the job. After school, Olivia rushed home to prepare for dinner. She pulled out her mother's china, carefully stored since her passing 10 years before, and set the table with a fresh-cut bouquet of wildflowers from the meadow behind her house. The pantry wasn't abundant, but she had enough to make a respectable chicken stew, fresh bread, and an apple pie with fruit from the tree her father had planted when she was born. As she worked, Olivia found herself humming, a lightness in her step that had been absent for months. She changed into her best dress, a modest blue cotton with white trim that brought out the color of her eyes, and pinned up her chestnut hair in a more flattering style than her usual severe schoolteacher's bun. Zachary arrived precisely at 6, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt under his usual vest. The sight of him standing on her porch, hat in hand, sent a flutter through her chest that had nothing to do with nerves and everything to do with the way his eyes warmed when they fell upon her. "You look lovely," he said simply, handing her a small package wrapped in brown paper. A hostess gift. Inside, Olivia found a beautiful leather-bound journal, its pages cream-colored and inviting. "It's perfect," she breathed, running her fingers over the soft cover. "How did you know I love to write? Your father mentioned once that you kept journals, said you filled them with stories and observations." He looked slightly embarrassed. "I thought perhaps you might need a new one." Dinner was a revelation. Away from the prying eyes of the town, Zachary revealed himself to be a thoughtful conversationalist with a dry wit that repeatedly surprised laughter from her. He told her about his ranch, the challenges and joys of building something from nothing, the satisfaction of seeing his hard work bear fruit. In turn, she shared stories of her students, her time in Boston, her dreams of someday expanding the school to include higher education for those who couldn't afford to go east. "You're quite remarkable, Olivia Allen," Zachary said as they sat on her porch afterward, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. "Most women would have left Oakridge after what you've been through." "Most women haven't loved this place their whole lives," she replied. "Despite its flaws, it's home," he nodded, understanding in his eyes. "That's how I feel about the Double G. The moment I saw that land, I knew it was where I belonged, even though the town wasn't welcoming, even then." He was quiet for a moment. People fear what they don't understand. "After the war, I wasn't the same boy who left. Took time for folks to realize I wasn't a danger to them." "What happened?" Olivia asked softly. "During the war, I mean, if you don't mind my asking." Zachary's gaze turned distant. "I saw things, did things. Lost men under my command because of orders I gave." His voice dropped. "For a long time after, I couldn't sleep without seeing their faces. Your father recognized it when others just saw a surly ex-soldier. He'd lost men too in the Mexican War, knew the weight of it." Impulsively, Olivia reached out and placed her hand over his. He was good at seeing people's pain. It's what made him such a wonderful teacher. Zachary turned his hand to clasp hers, his touch warm and steady. "He would be proud of you, you know, standing your ground, fighting for your students." They sat in comfortable silence as the last rays of sun disappeared and the first stars appeared. Olivia was acutely aware of his hand still holding hers, of the solid presence of him beside her on the porch swing. "I should go," he said finally, reluctance clear in his voice. "Early start tomorrow." At the steps, he turned back to her, his expression suddenly serious. "Olivia, I want to be clear about something. My interest in you, it's not just gratitude to your father or some misplaced sense of obligation. I admire you. Your strength, your kindness, your determination." He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "I'd like to call on you properly if you'd permit it." Olivia's heart soared even as caution whispered in her ear. "The town will talk." "The town always talks," he said with a slight smile. "Question is, do we give them something worth talking about?" She couldn't help but laugh. "When you put it that way, yes, Zachary Gentry, you may call on me." His smile was like the sunrise, brilliant and full of promise. "Sunday then, after church, perhaps a picnic by the river." "I'd like that very much." He took her hand once more and in a gesture that made her breath catch, raised it to his lips for a brief, gentle kiss. "Until Sunday, Olivia." As she watched him ride away, Olivia felt as if her life had somehow shifted on its axis. In the span of a week, she had gone from despair to hope, from isolation to connection. And at the center of that transformation stood Zachary Gentry, a man as complex and unexpected as the frontier itself. Sunday arrived with clear skies and a gentle breeze, perfect weather for a picnic. Olivia dressed with care in a yellow dress that she hadn't worn since returning to Oakridge, adding a simple cameo brooch that had been her mother's. The stares and whispers as she entered the church were expected, but they carried a different quality now, curiosity rather than condemnation, speculation rather than judgment. She held her head high, taking her usual seat near the front. Midway through Reverend Thompson's sermon on forgiveness, Olivia became aware of a presence behind her. Glancing back, she saw Zachary sitting several rows back, his attention seemingly fixed on the preacher but a small smile playing at his lips when their eyes met briefly. After the service, as the congregation filed out into the churchyard, Zachary made his way to her side. "Good morning, Miss Allen," he said formally, though his eyes danced with private amusement. "Might I have a word?" Before she could respond, Mrs. Wilcox approached, her pinched expression making her disapproval clear. "Miss Allen, Mr. Gentry, how unexpected to see you both at worship today." "I attend regularly, Mrs. Wilcox," Olivia replied pleasantly. "Though I believe Mr. Gentry typically attends services at the mission near his ranch." "Indeed," Zachary agreed, "but I had business in town today that couldn't wait." Mrs. Wilcox's thin eyebrows rose. "Business on the Lord's Day, how interesting." "The Lord's work takes many forms, madam," Zachary said smoothly. "Speaking of which, I believe your husband was looking for you." As Mrs. Wilcox hurried away, Olivia bit back a smile. "That was neatly done." "Years of practice dealing with busybodies," Zachary replied with a wink. "Are you ready for our picnic? I've had my cook prepare something special." They rode in Zachary's buggy, a handsome vehicle pulled by two matching bay horses. The road to the river took them past rolling meadows dotted with wildflowers and through a stand of cottonwoods whose leaves rustled pleasantly in the breeze. "It's beautiful out here," Olivia said, breathing deeply of the clean, sage-scented air. "I don't get out of town often enough." "The territory has its own kind of beauty," Zachary agreed. "Different from the east, but no less magnificent." The spot he chose for their picnic was perfect, a grassy bank overlooking a gentle bend in the river, shaded by an ancient willow tree. From his buggy, Zachary produced a wicker basket and a thick blanket, which he spread on the ground with a flourish. The meal was simple but delicious: cold chicken, fresh bread, cheese, and apple tarts that melted in the mouth. They ate and talked, the conversation flowing easily between them. Zachary told her about his plans to expand the ranch, his dreams of breeding horses as well as cattle. Olivia shared her hopes for the school, her desire to establish a proper library for the town. "You know," Zachary said thoughtfully as they finished the last of the tarts, "the old Simmons place just outside town has been sitting empty for nearly a year. It's a good-sized building, too big for a family but perfect for, say, a library or meeting hall." Olivia's eyes widened. "Are you suggesting—" "Just thinking aloud," he said with a casual shrug that didn't quite hide the spark of excitement in his eyes. "Property's going to waste. Town could use a proper place for books and learning. Seems like a natural solution." "It would be perfect," Olivia agreed, her mind already racing with possibilities. "But the cost might be negotiable, especially if a certain rancher who's been looking to invest in the town's future were to take an interest." She studied his face, seeing the sincerity behind the offer. "You do that, for the town," he agreed, "and for a certain school teacher who believes everyone deserves access to education." Impulsively, Olivia leaned forward and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. "You're a good man, Zachary Gentry." A flush crept up his neck and he cleared his throat. "Don't go spreading that around, might ruin my reputation." They laughed together, the sound mingling with the gentle music of the flowing river and the rustling leaves above. As the afternoon waned, they packed up the remains of their picnic and walked along the riverbank, speaking of small things, favorite books, childhood memories, the changing seasons. When their hands brushed accidentally, Zachary took hers in a gentle grip that felt as natural as breathing. "I've been thinking," he said as they watched a pair of eagles soaring overhead, "about the future." "What about it?" Olivia asked, suddenly breathless. Zachary turned to face her, still holding her hand. "I know we haven't known each other long, at least not in this way. But I feel as if I've been waiting for you without realizing it." He paused, his expression earnest. "I'm not a man given to flowery speeches or grand declarations, but I do know my own mind, and my mind is firmly made up about you, Olivia Allen." Her heart hammered in her chest. And what has it decided? That I want to court you properly, that I want to see where this path between us leads. His thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. If you'll have me. The simple honesty of his words moved her more than any elaborate declaration could have. I'd like that very much, Zachary. His smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss so tender it brought tears to her eyes. The weeks that followed were the happiest Olivia could remember. True to his word, Zachary courted her with a combination of old-fashioned propriety and frontier practicality. He called on her regularly, sometimes bringing small gifts books for her students, wildflowers he'd picked along the way, once a kitten he'd rescued from a storm drain that promptly made itself at home in her kitchen. Word spread quickly through Oakridge about their courtship. The reactions were mixed. Some approved, seeing the match as advantageous for a woman in Olivia's precarious position. Others whispered that she had set her cap for the wealthiest bachelor in the territory. But as time passed, and the sight of them together became commonplace, even the gossips found less to say. Zachary proved to be as good as his word about the Simmons property. He purchased it quietly and set about having it renovated, consulting Olivia at every step about what would be needed for a proper town library. When Edgar Thornton attempted to interfere, suggesting the town had no need for such frivolities, Zachary simply invited other merchants to invest in the project, making it clear that those who supported the town's advancement would receive preferential treatment in future business dealings with the Double G. By midsummer, the library was taking shape. Olivia spent her free hours cataloging donated books and writing to her contacts in Boston for additional volumes. Zachary often joined her, his practical mind complementing her academic approach as they planned the space together. It was during one such evening, as they sat surrounded by stacks of books in the half-finished library, that Zachary broached a subject that had been on his mind. Harvest Festival's coming up next month, he said casually, helping her sort a pile of geography texts. Olivia agreed, distracted by a particularly interesting atlas. The children are already excited. Tommy Jenkins is determined to win the pie-eating contest this year. I was thinking we might attend together. Something in his tone made her look up. We've attended church together for weeks now. I assumed we'd go to the festival together as well. Zachary set down the book he was holding, his expression suddenly serious. I meant as more than courting partners, Olivia. Her heart skipped a beat. What did you have in mind? He moved around the table to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands in his. I had in mind attending as husband and wife, if you'll have me. Olivia's breath caught. Zachary, I love you, he said simply. I think I started falling in love with you the moment you put your hand in mine and walked down that street with your head held high, refusing to be shamed for something you didn't do. You're the strongest, kindest, most principled woman I've ever known, and I want to spend the rest of my life by your side. Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. I love you too, she whispered, so much that it sometimes frightens me. Is that a yes? He asked, hope clear in his voice. Yes, she laughed through her tears. Yes, I'll marry you, Zachary Gentry. He pulled her into his arms, his kiss conveying all the love and promise that words couldn't express. When they finally parted, both breathless, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. It was my mother's, he explained as he opened it to reveal a delicate gold ring with a single perfect pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. She made me promise I'd only give it to a woman worthy of it, a woman of substance and character. As he slipped it onto her finger, Olivia felt as if her heart might burst with happiness. It's beautiful. Not half as beautiful as you, he replied, his eyes shining with love and certainty. The news of their engagement spread through Oakridge like wildfire. Most of the town responded with congratulations, especially the parents of Olivia's students who had seen firsthand how Zachary's support had strengthened the school. Even Mrs. Wilcox managed a tight-lipped acknowledgement when they announced it officially after church the following Sunday. Only Edgar Thornton and his most steadfast allies maintained their disapproval. though they were wise enough to keep it mostly to themselves given Zachary's growing influence in town affairs. The weeks leading up to the Harvest Festival were a whirlwind of preparation. Olivia continued teaching while also helping to complete the library and prepare for her new life as Mrs. Gentry. Zachary divided his time between ranch work and expanding the small but comfortable house on his property, adding a proper study for Olivia and bookshelves in every room. The day of the festival dawned bright and clear, the crisp autumn air carrying the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke. The town square had been transformed overnight, with booths for games and food, bunting in harvest colors, and a dance floor set up near the bandstand. Olivia and Zachary arrived hand in hand, both dressed in their Sunday best. The simple gold band on her left hand caught the sunlight as they moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and well wishes from friends and neighbors. The festivities were in full swing when Edgar Thornton appeared before them, his face flushed with what might have been anger or too much of the cider being served at one of the booths. "Well, if it isn't the town's most celebrated couple," he said, his tone just shy of sneering. "The schoolmarm and the rancher. Quite a convenient match, wouldn't you say?" Zachary's expression hardened. "You've had too much to drink, Edgar. Go home before you say something you'll regret." But Thornton wasn't to be deterred. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Girl with no prospects and mounting debts suddenly catches the eye of the richest man in the county. Mighty convenient timing." Several nearby conversations halted as people turned to watch the confrontation. Olivia felt a familiar sense of shame trying to take hold, but pushed it away, standing straighter beside Zachary. "Mr. Thornton," she said clearly, "your opinion of my character or my engagement is of no interest to me or my fiancé. Please excuse us." She tried to move past him, but Thornton blocked their path. "Not so fast. Town deserves to know the truth about their precious teacher, how she tried to steal from my store, that's enough." The new voice belonged to Sheriff Mills, who had appeared beside them with remarkable speed for a man of his years. "You're disrupting a public event, Edgar. Time to go home." "I'm just speaking the truth." "You're speaking slander," Zachary said quietly, "and I won't have it. Not today, not ever again." Something in his tone must have penetrated Thornton's alcohol-fueled bravado, for he took a step back. "Fine, have your celebration, but mark my words, this town will see through both of you eventually." As he stalked away, the crowd that had gathered slowly dispersed, conversations resuming with an awkward forced gaiety. Olivia felt Zachary's arm tighten around her waist. "I'm sorry about that," he murmured. "Some people never change." "It doesn't matter," she replied, surprised to find she meant it. "What matters is us, our future together." He smiled down at her, love clear in his eyes. "You're right, as usual, in speaking of our future." He gestured toward the bandstand where the musicians were taking their places. "I believe they're playing our song." As they joined other couples on the dance floor, Olivia felt the last of her tension melt away. Thornton's bitter words couldn't touch the joy of this day, the certainty she felt in Zachary's arms, the future they were building together. The harvest moon rose over Oakridge, bathing the town in silver light as the festival continued into the evening. Lanterns glowed golden among the trees, casting dancing shadows across the square. Children ran laughing between booths, their faces sticky with candy and excitement. Older folks sat on benches, tapping their feet to the music and reminiscing about festivals past. In the center of it all, Zachary and Olivia danced, their movements in perfect harmony as if they'd been partners for years rather than months. As the music slowed to a waltz, he pulled her closer, his breath warm against her ear. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly. Olivia looked around at the town that had once shunned her, now celebrating alongside them. She thought of her father, who would have loved to see this day, and of the journey that had brought her here, the pain and uncertainty that had ultimately led to this moment of perfect happiness. "I'm thinking," she said, meeting Zachary's gaze with a smile that came from the depths of her soul, "that sometimes the hardest days lead us exactly where we're meant to be." His answering smile was tender as he bent to kiss her, uncaring of the watchful eyes around them. In that moment, there was only the two of them, their hearts beating as one beneath the harvest moon, their future stretching before them like the vast Wyoming sky, boundless, beautiful and full of promise. As autumn gave way to winter, preparations for the wedding occupied much of their time. They had decided on a Christmas ceremony, feeling it appropriate to begin their new life together during the season of hope and renewal. Reverend Thompson would perform the service in the church, followed by a reception at the newly completed library, Zachary's suggestion, which had delighted Olivia. The library had quickly become the pride of Oakridge. Even those who had initially scoffed at the idea found themselves drawn to its warm, welcoming rooms, with comfortable chairs by the fireplace and shelves steadily filling with books from near and far. Zachary had commissioned a brass plaque for the entrance, dedicating the building to the memory of Jonathan Allen, who believed in the power of knowledge to transform lives. When Olivia first saw it, she had wept in Zachary's arms, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "He would have been so proud," she'd said, "not just of the library, but of you, of the man you've become." The day of the wedding arrived with a light snowfall that blanketed Oakridge in pristine white. The church was decorated with evergreen boughs and red berries, simple yet elegant. As Olivia waited in the small antechamber, adjusting the lace veil that had been her mother's, she felt a profound sense of peace. Mrs. Cooper, who had insisted on helping her prepare, dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. "You look like an angel, Miss Allen." "Mr. Gentry won't know what hit him." Olivia smiled, smoothing the ivory satin of her gown. "Thank you for everything, Mrs. Cooper. Your friendship these past months has meant more than I can say." "Nonsense," the older woman replied briskly, though her eyes remained damp. "You saved my Sarah. Helped half the children in town read and write better than their parents. It's us who should be thanking you." She patted Olivia's hand. "Now, let's get you married before that handsome rancher of yours thinks you've changed your mind." The church was full to bursting when the doors opened, and Olivia began her walk down the aisle. Faces turned to watch her students and their parents, townspeople who had once whispered behind her back but now smiled in genuine pleasure, ranch hands from the Double G in uncomfortable Sunday suits, their hats clutched respectfully in rough hands. And at the altar, waiting with barely contained emotion, stood Zachary. His eyes never left her as she approached, his expression a mixture of awe and adoration that made her heart swell with love. Sheriff Mills, who had agreed to give her away in her father's absence, placed her hand in Zachary's with a gruff "take care of her, son." The warmth in Zachary's palm as it closed around hers seemed to flow through her entire body, chasing away the December chill. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of emotion. They had written their own vows, simple declarations of love and commitment that brought tears to the eyes of even the most stoic ranchers present. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, Zachary's kiss was both tender and possessive, a promise of the life they would build together. The reception at the library was a joyous affair. Tables had been set up among the bookshelves, laden with food contributed by nearly every family in town. A small band played in the main reading room, where the furniture had been moved aside to create a dance floor. Children darted between the adults, fueled by cake and excitement. As the evening progressed, Olivia found herself standing by the window, watching the snow continue to fall in the gathering darkness. Zachary appeared beside her, 2 glasses of punch in his hands. "Happy, Mrs. Gentry?" he asked, offering her one of the glasses. The name sent a thrill through her. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied honestly. He clinked his glass against hers. "To new beginnings. And to the path that brought us here," she added, "however difficult it sometimes seemed." Later, as they prepared to leave for the ranch that was now their home, Olivia tossed her bouquet into the crowd of well-wishers. It was caught, to everyone's amusement, by young Sarah Cooper, now fully recovered and flushed with embarrassed delight. Zachary helped Olivia into the waiting sleigh, tucking warm blankets around her before taking the reins. As they pulled away from the library, the assembled townspeople cheered and waved, their calls of congratulation and good wishes following the newlyweds into the snowy night. The ranch house glowed with welcome when they arrived, lanterns burning in every window. Zachary had given the ranch hands the night off, ensuring their privacy. As he carried her across the threshold, Olivia felt a sense of homecoming unlike anything she had experienced before. "Welcome home, wife," he murmured against her hair. "Home," she repeated, the word tasting sweet on her lips. "Our home." That night, as snow continued to fall outside their window, they discovered each other anew, their love expressed in tender touches and whispered endearments. In Zachary's arms, Olivia found a belonging she had sought her entire life without realizing it. And in her eyes, Zachary found the acceptance and understanding he had never dared hope for after the darkness of war. As spring returned to Wyoming, bringing new life to the land, Olivia found herself preparing for another new beginning. The first hint had come with unexpected fatigue, followed by mornings spent fighting nausea. Dr. Peterson had confirmed what she had begun to suspect by Christmas. The Gentry household would welcome a new member. When she told Zachary, his reaction had been everything she could have hoped for: joy and wonder, followed by a protectiveness that both amused and touched her. "You're not climbing any more ladders in the library," he declared, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. "And no more lifting those heavy books." And she had silenced him with a kiss. "I'm with child, my love, not made of glass." Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, most of them while continuing to work far harder than teaching school and organizing books. But she had agreed to be sensible, understanding that his concern came from love and the lingering fear of loss that war had instilled in him. The news spread quickly through Oakridge, met with genuine pleasure by most. Even Edgar Thornton, who had maintained a cold distance since the wedding, managed a stiff nod of acknowledgement when they passed on the street. As her pregnancy progressed, Olivia continued teaching, though she agreed to Zachary's insistence that she hire an assistant for the more physical aspects of the job. Young Mary Jensen, Harold's granddaughter and a former student, proved eager and capable, showing a natural gift for working with the younger children. The library flourished under Olivia's guidance, becoming not just a repository for books but a true community center. Reading circles for adults who had never learned their letters met in the evenings. Children gathered for story hours on Saturday afternoons. Even visiting cattlemen and cowboys found their way there during stops in town, grateful for a quiet place to read newspapers from back east or write letters home. Through it all, Zachary remained her steadfast partner, dividing his time between the growing ranch and his family, never too busy to listen to her ideas or offer his own. Their evenings were spent in comfortable companionship, reading aloud to each other or simply sitting on the porch, watching the sun set over the land they both loved. As summer waned and Olivia's time grew nearer, Zachary hired a housekeeper to help with the running of their home, Mrs. Larson, a widow from a neighboring town with experience in midwifery. Her calm competence and no-nonsense attitude were exactly what was needed as Olivia's energy waned and her anxiety about the birth increased. "First babies always make their mamas nervous," Mrs. Larson assured her. "But you're strong and healthy, and that husband of yours would move heaven and earth if you needed it. You'll do just fine." Their son arrived on a crisp October morning after a long but uncomplicated labor. Zachary, who had refused to leave Olivia's side despite Mrs. Larson's initial protests, wept unashamedly when the baby was placed in his arms. "He's perfect," he whispered, carefully returning the swaddled infant to Olivia's embrace. "Just like his mother." They named him Jonathan Zachary Gentry, honoring both her father and his. As Olivia looked down at her son's tiny face, seeing echoes of Zachary in the shape of his nose and chin, she felt a love so profound it seemed to fill every corner of her being. "Thank you," she said softly, reaching for Zachary's hand. He leaned down to kiss her forehead. "For what? For this, for everything. For taking my hand that day in town and showing me I wasn't alone," understanding dawned in his eyes. "I should be thanking you." You gave me a reason to truly live again, not just exist." He touched their son's cheek with a gentle finger. "And now you've given me the future I never dared dream of." The christening was held in the church where they had married, with the entire town seemingly in attendance. Sarah Cooper, now a promising student at the school, stood as godmother while Marcus, Zachary's loyal foreman, served as godfather. As Reverend Thompson blessed the child, Olivia looked around at the gathered faces, friends and neighbors who had become like family, students who were growing into fine young men and women, ranchers and merchants who had once viewed her with suspicion, but now counted her among their own. Her gaze came to rest on Zachary, standing tall and proud beside her, their son cradled in his arms. In his eyes, she saw the same wonder she felt that from the darkest day of her life had come this unexpected journey to joy. Later, as they stood on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in shades of gold and purple, little Jonathan sleeping peacefully in his cradle nearby, Zachary slipped his arm around her waist. "Happy?" he asked, echoing the question he had posed on their wedding night. Olivia leaned into his embrace, feeling the solid strength of him against her. "Completely," she answered, knowing it was true. The path had not always been easy, but it had led her here to this man, this child, this life filled with purpose and love. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Olivia thought of that moment months ago when she had stood alone and humiliated in the street, certain her life in Oakridge was over. How wrong she had been. It hadn't been an ending at all, but the beginning of everything that mattered. "What are you thinking?" Zachary asked, his voice soft in the gathering dusk. Olivia smiled up at him, her heart full. "I'm thinking that sometimes the moments that seem like our greatest failures are actually the door to our greatest blessings." He nodded, understanding as he always did. "And sometimes," he added, pressing a gentle kiss to her lips, "the hand offered in our darkest hour leads us to the light we've been searching for all along." As they stood together in the fading light, their son sleeping peacefully nearby and the vast Wyoming sky spreading endlessly above them, Olivia knew with bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, home, in every sense of the word, with the man who had taken her hand when she needed it most and never let go.